Welcome to Grammar 4N. In this booklet, we will be reviewing verb tenses and forms, and we're going to learn about interrogative adjectives and pronouns. So first, let's jump into verb tenses and forms. Once again, this is a review, so we're going to gloss over this a bit. Each verb tense is a form that expresses the time of the action or state of the verb. We work with regular and irregular verbs, and of course we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is appropriately agreeing with the subject, whether it's the helping verb agreeing with the subject or it's the simple tenses agreeing with the subject. So speaking of simple tenses, don't forget about those. We've learned a lot, but these are still important pieces of grammar to remember. But of course, we also apply them to our new forms, progressive and perfect. We will be doing all the same activities we've already had you done. Nothing is going to be different or new when it comes to these activities. So pay attention to the directions, pay attention to what's given to you, and that means on the page, on the reference sheets, the explanation at the front. Take your time, make sure you're really sure of your answers. And now we're going to move on to the new stuff, which is interrogative adjectives and pronouns. So we're going to jump right into the explanation. So first we're going to go over interrogative adjectives. Interrogative adjectives are just adjectives that are usually found in a question. Pretty straightforward, just an adjective. So let's look at which ones are most common. It's going to be which and what and whose. So when I say these are the most common, that should be a red light in your mind saying, okay, I'm going to see those in this book, and you're not going to see any other interrogative adjectives. So just a heads up there. Let's look at this first sentence. Which computer is available? So this is pretty straightforward. We have our verb, which is. Computer is our subject, and available is our predicate adjective, and it's describing the computer. What else is describing the computer is which. Which computer? It's telling you more information about the computer and that we are asking about that computer, whatever computer it is. We're not sure which one is it. So it's a describing word in this sentence. Next we have whose car are we taking? Once again, we have our subject and we have our verb phrase. Pretty straightforward. We are taking. And what is being taken? The car. The car is the direct object, but we don't know who owns the car. We don't know the owner. So whose car? We're asking to get more information, and whose is describing the car. Now we can move on to interrogative pronouns. These are also pronouns that usually start a question. And that's an important thing to notice. The pronouns will start the sentence, start the question, but that does not mean it's going to be the subject. So just make sure you watch out for that. Common pronouns, who, whom, what, which, whose, whatever, and whoever. Notice that there is some overlap between the interrogative adjectives and interrogative pronouns. So you need to make sure that you are really paying attention to how the words in this sentence relate to each other. So let's look at the examples. Which is available? So in this sentence, what I would suggest is first find your verb. Is your verb. And then you have the two words which and available left. We know that available is not a noun. It's an adjective. That's our PA. Which is our subject. It's an interrogative pronoun. So this is where it gets tricky because normally you would think, well, it's a question. Maybe I can kind of switch it around and put it in statement format. But it already essentially is. We already have the whole subject, verb, extra information format to this sentence. So even if you want to try and move it around, you can't really do that when it comes to interrogative pronouns as subjects. Because like I said, that type of pronoun, the interrogative pronouns, usually start the question anyway. So you're already essentially in statement format, but because it's an interrogative pronoun, it's a question. So just make sure that you're paying attention once again to how these words relate to each other. And if you don't have a prepositional phrase or anything like that, then find that verb first, and that's going to help you a lot. On the next sentence, it's a little bit easier. It's a little bit more like the sentences that we're used to that are questions. whose are we taking? So we're finding our subject and our verb. Our verb is very easy. Are taking. That's our verb phrase. And so now you just have to determine who is completing the action. We. We are taking. And then we have our direct object, which is whose. So just take your time with this. You could flip it around and make it into statement format. I'm just going to say that that's not your best rule of thumb in this booklet for every single sentence. So just watch out for that. And of course, you diagram these interrogative adjectives and pronouns just as you would any other pronoun or adjective. So they're not special in that sense. Whenever it's a subject, you put it down as the subject. Whenever it's describing the direct object, you have it coming off of the direct object. Pretty straightforward. So now we're going to play with a few other sentences. Whatever happened to that book? So of course, what I'm going to say is first, cross out any prepositional phrases, identify your verb. This one, we do have a prepositional phrase, so we can cross out to that book. Whatever happened to that book? And book is our OP. That's super helpful because now all we have left is whatever happened. And we can see from this that whatever is our subject and happened is our verb. So pretty straightforward, and honestly, when you think about it, this is a very basic sentence. Think about how you would diagram that. You've got your subject, you got your verb, and then you have your prepositional phrase coming off of that verb. Pretty straightforward. So now let's go on to the next sentence. Our next sentence is, which shops are open? And so now we don't have a prepositional phrase to help us out. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to identify our verb first, which is are. And so now what we need to figure out is, okay, so we've got our verb. What's our subject? Which nouns or pronouns do we have available to us? And when you look at this sentence, you really only have one noun, and that's going to be shops. The shops are our subject, and open is our PA. And so now all we need to figure out is which is describing shops. It's telling you more information about the shops. We're asking about more information about the shops. So notice that whenever you have these, they're pretty abstract in their ideas. So whatever is a general event, a general thing. It's not a concrete noun or pronoun. It's more abstract, which is what we've already gone over in Grammar 3. So just watch out for that. Take your time, find your prepositional phrases, find your verbs, and you should be good to go. So now we're going to look at sentence diagramming. And just like what we did in 4D and 4I and 4N, we are going to be going over how to create your own reference sheet for sentence diagramming. So here you're going to get something like this, and you just have to fill it out according to the functions of speech. So like I mentioned in the previous videos for D and I, you're essentially going to be putting in subject, OP, DO. We don't want noun. We don't want pronoun. We need more information than that because, like I said, this is your reference for the rest of this book. So let's just pick out a few things just to make sure you're remembering them. Here you have an adjective describing a subject, and then you have a word coming off of that adjective, and it's describing that adjective. Remember, adjectives only describe nouns and sometimes pronouns, but in this one, it's really just going to be an adverb describing an adjective. So just make sure you're watching out for that. Adverbs describe adjectives. Adjectives do not describe adjectives. So next, I'm going to point out this guy to you. And so just remember that when you have that understood lack of preposition, you have the X in parentheses, that means that you have an indirect object. So make sure you're writing IO or indirect object, not noun, not pronoun. So then, of course, we also have an adjective describing the IO, and you can just write adjective. And then lastly, I'm going to point this guy out, and hopefully this rings a bell as well. This is an infinitive, but we're not going to write infinitive because that's the quote-unquote part of speech. The function of that is going to be direct object. So you're going to write DO, direct object. You can just put it on that horizontal line. You don't have to separate the D and the O so that one of them's on the diagonal line and one's on the horizontal line. Just put it together, DO, and you're good to go. And then, of course, this will be used on the next day to identify how to diagram this sentence. So just make sure you're paying attention. Notice when it comes to the indirect objects, you need to remember to put in that understood lack of preposition, that X in parentheses. And that's going to make sure that you are diagramming it all correctly. If you have any questions over this or any other grammar booklet, please contact the owner of your center or the person who grades your grammar.